Welcome to The Next Man Up, where we explore the misconceptions and paradox around modern masculinity. Join me on my quest to seek the truth through unfiltered conversations with the men behind the masks, so women can better understand men and men can better understand themselves.
I honestly think the deepest learning is how someone manages two things. And I tell my clients, look out for this as soon as possible and try to create these moments as soon as possible. Number one, how the person manages you in a moment of conflict. And number two, how they are when you express a need. And you want to look for someone who allows you to have a need and allows you to be frustrating and disappointing. And they show up without being harmful or punitive. And that is a really core part of mental health functioning. Look for that.
Chris.
Hey.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Would you mind telling us who you are and what you do?
It's such an anxiety-inducing question. Sometimes I don't know what I do. I guess the easiest way is I'm Dr. Chris Donaghue. I'm a clinical therapist in Los Angeles. Also, I like to say educator and activist. I think that within the field of sexology, human sexuality, and psychology, activism has to be a component. It's such a pathologized and even in psychology academically very illegitimized, not necessarily taken seriously, and so many people just jump into the field not really trained, and so much damage can be done. And I think that normalizing piece is so important. So therapist, educator, author, but also activist.
Yeah, wow. And how did you get into this in the first place?
Gosh, that's a good one. My career trajectory is one of putting my head down and just following the next step that made sense. There was no plan. There was no wider scope understanding of what I was doing. I studied nutrition and food science at NYU, and it was just out of interest. Yeah. My parents were very supportive of just, long story short, got more interested in clinical work. And when I graduated, I started working at a sex addiction treatment center. And they were pathologizing a lot of things that me and my very healthy friends were doing. And so there was this tension between what I was being trained to, again, pathologize and essentially shame. And all of these amazing people in my life were doing those things. We were shaming porn use, masturbation, kink, sex worker use, all of that. And then I found myself in the sex therapy world, which was the most healing thing. So I'd say my mission statement's very much a reaction to culture and my sex addiction early start.
How did you know at such a young age that something's off here with the sex addiction? Like this isn't aligned, and what was that aha moment for you?
I've always been someone who both lived on the margins of culture and very much valued the health and knowledge that came from living outside of the Kool-Aid, drinking the Kool-Aid and normative culture. Always was in the punk rock scene, the under scene, the indie scene, always like underneath. And I really wanted to find a way to kind of normalize and help people on the margins. And I started dating people that lived on the margins. Let's talk about sex work. Yeah. I always had really good friends and have been in a relationship with sex workers. And so I both saw clinically the shaming and pathologizing, I saw it as a person in the world, but I also saw it as a best friend and a partner. And that just kind of galvanized and continued to motivate. And so I would say that's always a little bit of a thread that's driving my work.
Yeah. So what was the distinction for you between where compulsive sexual behavior is a real issue and addiction? Like, is addiction defined by the biomarkers? Is that what we're looking at for addiction versus compulsive behavior?
So addiction, unfortunately, within sex doesn't have a universalizable operational definition that we're all using. So what that means in simple terms is just if someone uses that word, it's based on their own made-up understanding. And often, in fact, when we say someone's a sex addict, it's kind of the same thing when we call someone a slut. The speaker themselves is telling on themselves and saying, I'm uncomfortable with what I'm seeing. So in the field of sex therapy and sexology, we use a compulsivity model, which just understands that people might feel out of control. People might struggle with maybe getting needs met via sex that could be met otherwise. Also, sometimes seeking sex compulsively could be a lack of internal resources for self-soothing. But I also think there's this alternative piece that I'm actually going to talk at the conference about today, which is how can we also not just try to heal sex, but use sex therapeutically.
Yeah. And how do we do that?
That's right.
Yeah.
Is that a real question?
Yeah, that's a real question.
That's such a big
I have some
question.
ideas. I've definitely used it myself.
I think you
I think
want to answer
we
that
can map
as well.
it out. Yeah.
I think using sex therapeutically, first and foremost for me, is this acknowledgement that culturally we've become very sex positive, but we still haven't gotten sexually conscious.
Yeah.
So we're still not looking at why we're doing what we're doing.
Totally.
Et cetera, et cetera. So I think the work is getting deep in that.
Yeah, it's funny because I had certain fixed beliefs, even like from last year's conference to this year. I was very much like, no, I'm monogamous, like I'm open-minded, I don't hold judgment, but for myself, I'm like very much more vanilla and monogamous. I never did sex work and was in a relationship at the same time. And that was like that split of like, no one could love me and be okay with that. It's like the working girl's paradox, right? And then I met someone this year who was very dominant, very kinky, but was so doting to me and like so I, like very much like Noah from The Notebook, like following me around.
Wait, which one was Noah?
The lead guy.
Oh, that's
the
him?
lead guy.
Okay,
Yeah,
gotcha.
And then but sexually just like extremely dominant, and he just changed my perspective on everything. And he brought up like a gangbang, and I had a visceral response where I'm like, oh great, he's like fetishized me, like fuck this guy, And then I started to understand where that came from.
Yeah.
And his father had given him his first line of like cocaine at 13 and would beat him, and then it was his best friend to break him down and build him back up, which is what he would say to me, I'm gonna break you down and build you back up. And like it had this emotional context to it. And then I started to be like, oh wow, someone could actually care about me, wants to build me back up, and also like let me totally relinquish control in this context. And that I understood the emotional meaning behind it, and then I really wanted it.
Yeah.
Because it was like a reclamation of the horror that I thought could not merge with my Madonna, and I couldn't be this whole person. And so once I brought in the emotional component, I was like, oh, even the profane can be sacred in this context.
I love that.
Yeah.
And so sex as medicine, you just beautifully explained, and I think a lot of women could benefit from that integration, that I can both be a professional and a mom and a good girl and also participate in these other parts of my sexuality.
Yeah.
Right? And that can be healing. Because I believe, to take what you just said so powerfully further, sexual self-esteem, I think, is an under-acknowledged component of total self-esteem.
Totally.
And that we are so familiar with our shame, whether it's sexual, body, gender, profession, that we don't acknowledge that until it starts to get healed, which is kind of what you just spoke to.
Yeah, and didn't you had this quote last year, I believe, that's we have sex to the level of our maturity.
Oh my God, I'm going to be saying that again this year. I hope no one remembers that from last year.
No, and it's okay. This will air
Yeah,
later.
we have it right up to our level of development.
Yeah.
And so the sex you're having, how you define in terms of sexual orientation or gender, is really about your anxiety management. And you're so much more than that, but we don't tend to see sex as work to be done or something to really be delved into. So there's this like sexual shadow.
Yeah.
All the parts of ourselves that culture or others have told us we have to deny because we're a woman, a mom, a professional, parts of ourselves we have shame around and all of that, and we have to bring that in.
It's kind of the medium which tells us so much.
Yes.
Like that's what's been so profound to me when I first entered, this field. I was like trying to make meaning or understanding from a cerebral place of like analysis, right? But I was lacking the embodiment piece. And then the deeper I dive into this, I'm like, oh, our relationship to our sexuality literally represents everything. From our attachment to our shadow to everything. It's how you do that is how you do everything. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And that's like, it's not just sex therapy, right? It's like, it tells you so much. And I wish.
I'm like, this is the sound bite right here.
Yeah.
I'm going to just transcribe all that for my website because I think, as you said, it's the most powerful and honest assessment lens or vehicle into our deeper parts, right? It's our body esteem, our self-esteem, it's our traumas, it's our communication skills or lack thereof, it's the intimacy we can tolerate with self, with other. And that's why even if I'm working with a patient, because I'm a general psychotherapist first, and then I specialize in couples and sex therapy, no matter who I'm working with or what they're coming in for, we look at sex. Most people don't, especially if it's not sex-based. Yeah. And when you go right into sexuality, probably like with dating, if you start asking some sexual questions in a very thoughtful way, you learn more about someone than you would otherwise.
Totally, and I love bringing that into like, early stages before you even sleep with someone, playing with that as foreplay, but also to see how someone engages with you if they're willing to answer those questions. Because if they're not, then it's like, oh, that tells me everything I need to know. If you can't name your yeses and your nos and, make those distinctions, then like, what else are you shielding off?
That's right.
Right? Like, what tools?
And what parts of me are you maybe going to shield off out of your anxiety in relationship to me? Too?
Yeah. It's interesting. I attended ISTA this year, which is controversial for a lot of reasons. But as a sex worker, I'm very grounded in my know. So I knew that I would be fine going, and I've changed a lot. And they teach you RBDSMA. So R stands for relationships. Are you in one? Would you like to be in one? If we sleep together, will you assume that we're in one?
Yeah.
B is boundaries, which is physical and emotional, sexual. D is desires, same thing. S, sexual health, like not only like, what are we doing as a birth control method? How many partners do you have? But if we were to get pregnant accidentally,
yes.
How would we manage that?
So we're watching both the answers and the person's relationship to the question.
Yeah, and if they're stunted, right. And then M, which is my favorite, probably yours too, is meaning. Is this just like a physical exertion for you? Are you looking for connection? Are you looking to like transcend something? Like, what is this? And then A is aftercare. So their whole thing is like, if you can have that conversation and with the other person and you both feel good about it, then like by all means explore. It creates that framework.
And the beautiful part of that is both good and bad, depending how you look at it. That shrinks the dating pool down considerably, but it should if you want it to.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing. It's like I found it very hard for most of my life to date. And I totally would create these barriers to intimacy because I was closeted, right? So and my core belief was like, oh, again, no one could ever love me for this part, so I didn't tell anyone. And then, my dad always says, and he didn't know back then, but he's like, you're not for everybody. And I always knew, I have all these paradoxical traits, and like they're gonna confuse the shit out of people. But there's something beautiful about that, especially now that I've stepped into complete openness. I'm like, to get to know, it's like the fail fast method in startups. Like get to know quicker, right?
I prefer that versus putting a long-term investment in and both being disappointed, but also let's not rule out maybe preventing having been traumatized, even just on a small micro level because of that person's immaturity around sex and otherwise. Yeah,
well, right? I use things like when I'm dating someone, before I would just like, when I started being open right away, I would go right to like, I did sex work, blah, 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 and it was like, that didn't feel regulated.
Yeah.
So now there's A/B ways of testing. It's like, how do you feel about this? Or, I have a good friend that does sex work and gauging their response, because your truth isn't for everyone either.
Oh, so beautiful. Because I work with a lot of people in early recovery from drugs and alcohol, and they have these historical experiences that for a general person who hasn't gotten to know this now sober, stable, high-functioning person would be horrific. And they would anxiously disclose that so as to feel accepted from the jump. And I'd say to them, it's almost like, I use a lot of food references. I love food, especially donuts. So I say it's like a donut. Sex is like a donut too. There's no right way. But in this way, trust and intimacy is like a donut. People have to earn their right into the deeper, more honest parts of ourselves, right? And so that's what you were kind of saying. There's ways to still assess, but I'm going to protect myself from what you might do with what I might disclose socially, professionally, and we have to kind of like let people earn their right in.
How do you recommend someone go about that, especially coming from like addiction, like actual substances, or just, I had an ex who was like on the streets and like really, and was dark into a lot of stuff. And that came out after we broke up, actually, but I kind of knew. How do you suggest people kind of go about that in a safe way and slowly introduce themselves without trauma dumping on another?
Yeah, that's important. The donut. I think the outer levels are those really safe topics that are kind of, about who we are in the world and the things we're interested in. But it kind of goes back to the model you were pointing out. I think it's always about both people's answers and the relationship to those answers and how anxious it's making them. Let me kind of even make it broader because I do couples and sex work. I also think, in addition to what we're talking about around disclosures and how safe am I in your care, around material that I might share with you, because nothing's neutral, right? Any relational moment is going to impact you. You're going to feel better in the world around other people. And I always say, even the most anonymous sex in the dark, can't see you, don't know your name, from behind, you're still making me walk away feeling better in my body, around others or not. So take all relational sexual moments very seriously. But I honestly think the deepest learning is how someone manages two things. And I tell my clients, look out for this as soon as possible and try to create these moments as soon as possible. Number one, how the person manages you in a moment of conflict. And number two, how they are when you express a need. And you want to look for someone who allows you to have a need and allows you to be frustrating and disappointing. And they show up without being harmful or punitive. And that is a really core part of mental health functioning. Look for that.
Right. I love what you just said, too, about sex is, I firmly believe sex is never casual.
That's
I
right.
hate that term. I want to take it out of the lexicon. Like, we need a new one for it. I recently wrote about this because it helped me reconcile with like significant, profound, transformative relationships I had that weren't relationships in the traditional sense.
Sure.
And like the 8 types of intimacy. So we've got, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, experiential, creative, self, relational. I think I'm missing one there.
I can't remember.
Yeah. But my kind of theory there is it has to net 100. So you can have like, say 60% experiential. Like, let's look at Marilyn Monroe and Kennedy, right? Like, they shared, or Elizabeth Burton or Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, they shared this experiential intimacy, which was really significant because no one else is going through that fame together.
That's right.
And then they had the physical, but they didn't necessarily have the relational, but it was still profound. And like, I was seeing someone a lot younger last year coming out of a more traditional long-term relationship. And I would get frustrated because I didn't have a reference point for this. And because we had this like really significant physical connection, spiritual connection, and intellectual connection.
That's very important, but special and rare.
Yeah,
so
but then we go into the real world, and it's like, and I was like, oh, this person, I want to we would get frustrated.
Did you start to problematize the absence of that love connection? Were you problematizing? Because some clients panic at the lack of totality.
Well, because I was able to hold this dialectic, and I always knew that of like, he's 11 years younger than me, and he's not somewhere, like, I'm not going to be in a relationship with him, but I still have feelings here, and I don't actually want to be in a relationship with him, but then I would I would feel this relational impulse to like make him want to be.
Okay.
Right? So then I kind of workshopped that with these 8 intimacies, and I was like, oh, I'm able to own these other parts and not negate or nullify what it actually was.
That's
and
right.
I wish more people knew this, because that way we can like frame it not as casual encounters, but like, this is still significant, and this is not someone I'm going to spend the rest of my life with.
And it also reminds us that we're allowed to outsource those other levels and get that met via others.
Yeah.
And even if you're monogamous, it's okay to outsource.
Yeah.
I'm in a relationship, and my intellectual compatibility is met in some ways at sometimes. But then there's other moments like in this where I'm here with you. Yeah. Only you, as being someone in the industry, is going to be able to relate to sexological stuff. I can't expect my partner to be able to meet me on every single academic, intellectual level. And so it's okay to outsource. And that's why I like what you just said, the net 100, but it's not going to be evenly divided.
Well, and you also don't want someone to, like, I don't want someone in the same line of work as me. I don't want to date, like, that would be awful.
Definitely do not.
Yeah, I want someone's brain that works differently than mine, you know?
Yeah, 100%. There's more dynamicism.
Yeah, exactly. Can you talk to me about sexual bypassing?
Yes, thank you for asking me that.
We'll give you some water, too.
Please. Thank you so much for asking me that, because it's hard for me to break down simply, and it's a term that I'm really trying to get out in the world. And it's basically this understanding that a lot of ways we engage, a lot of ways and a lot of forms within which we engage sex are actually a way to bypass. Mm-hmm. What does that mean? It's comparable to this concept called spiritual bypassing, which is people using spiritual practices and techniques to actually not get more spiritual, but to actually maybe like build up their ego more. And we do that a lot with sex. Okay. And that's why I'm trying to bring us all back to going deeper and not trying to get to performing or being correct or living up to the gender ideal based on your gender designation, and just really coming back to the depth of it all.
Right. So what does that look like? In what ways do we sexually bypass? What do you find the most common ways?
I would say what it looks like in the most common ways would be people having rigid, habited ways that they have sex and claiming that that is just who they are or their true sexual self. And it's not. That's what you've become habited in, and that's also sex up to your level of anxiety. Rough example, someone might say something like, I'm a dom or I'm a top. No, that isn't what you are. That's what you're most comfortable doing, and that's what you often do. What is required that you don't have the capacity for, that subbing or bottoming brings forward?
Right.
People will rule out parts of their body and say, I don't like that being touched. Sometimes that's about gender and toxic masculinity, but it's also, again, about why. What is the meaning you make out of that body part being engaged? And why don't you have the ability to tolerate more pleasure? Our whole body gives us pleasure. Our whole body's an erogenous zone. There's no such thing as erogenous zones. It's everything. Right? And so basically, again, the answer is whenever we go back to patterns and habits, and I say that even around sexual orientation, that's also something we practice, and that's also something that's about anxiety management. And I do think we're all far more plastic sexually than we see ourselves to be.
Totally, and that's finally becoming a conversation I'm seeing is more common, especially having just moved to New York.
Okay.
I'm like, I used to have a very fixed idea of, as most do, and I'm ashamed to say so at this point because I'm just not there anymore. We're like, you know, if a man had any history of like bisexual tendencies, I'm like, no, I can't trust that gay. Like I just, you know? And now I'm like, oh, I trust it more because he knows what he likes and what he doesn't like. I'm actually dating someone like that now.
That's a painful one because women will experiment, explore, be bisexual, and they're allowed to circle back to heterosexuality in a way a man is not allowed. And I remember there was a time where I was doing a lot more media, and I was talking to a couple different experts, and I was talking about my own exploration of having been with all different kinds of gendered bodies, because I don't think in terms of what does that mean about me and what does that make me and what's my label. I don't know. I don't use those. So when people are like, how do you identify? I'm like, I don't.
I love that.
I don't. It's so confining. But they would always say to me, do you tell the women you might date or have sex with that you also have or might have sex with men? And I was like, well, what do you think it is I'm telling them? I'm telling them that. It seems so weaponizing or threatening. And so I appreciate your vulnerability in owning that there was a time when you also found that to maybe be them not owning their truth, and now you're realizing that person might actually know themselves the best.
Oh yeah, and I've just changed so much, like exponentially. I think every couple months I'm like, holy shit, I'm just continuously like the deeper I get into this, like I used to, like I said, how I thought about, you know, like an MMF threesome, or just like, I was like, there's no way love can coexist in that space of partner. And now I just have a totally flipped dynamic because like I said, I was in these asymmetrical monogamous relationships where, you know, I had a boyfriend in my mid-20s who would force threesomes on me. I mean, force, like I'll use that term, like I let it fucking happen. But I was a child, you know, and an idiot. And we lived together, and he would like invite a woman he met on Tinder without telling me to the bar, and then would just not talk to me until I agreed to go back. And so my views on that were just like, I'm like, nope, threesomes in relationships, especially with another woman, absolutely not. And so I kind of then went the other direction, and now I'm like, okay, it's probably a both and, but now I know what to look for and what to recognize.
And I love that example also. I mean, granted, he was very coercive, obviously, and problematic in there. But there's also this idea that I want us to talk more about too, which is, he definitely in that example violated informed consent. You weren't made fully aware of what was being expected. But I also like this idea of like internal informed consent. I want people to be more sexually mindful and check in on themselves. How do I feel before, during, and after? And that's sexual and non-sexual. Like, how do I feel when this person texts me? How do I feel when I'm spending time with them, sexually or otherwise? How do I feel after having been around them? And am I guided by my own internal experience? And if not, I don't have internal informed consent. Right? It's like external. Like, do you use, because I like to kind of play with before a couple decides to go to enter non-monogamy or even try a threesome, I'm like, let's try, like, what does flirting in front of your partner look like? You know, what does it excite you? Does it make you both anxious and excited? Does it make you angry? Like, what, you know, let's bring that into practice before we just go fully launch it. And that's also where I say, you know, I've been solicited so many times by friends that are like, oh, you know, Coral's a safe person to go to bring in for a threesome. I'm like,
I don't fuck my friends. I don't
Yeah,
like.
wait. You're like, that's both a compliment, but also a little frustrating.
Yeah. I'm like,
at
no.
times?
I'm like, no. This is where sex workers come in. I'm like, the best thing you can do.
I can only imagine how you are often put in that position. 'Cause I get it enough because of what I do that I can't imagine for you, where the assumption is that I have no boundaries.
Yeah.
And that I'll do it.
And then I just want to fuck all of you too for me. Like just because I'm like, I can doesn't mean I want to.
It's in fact the opposite for both of us.
Yeah,
that we both have more of a determining.
Exactly.
More
We're more
specific,
boundary.
more thoughtful, more boundary.
Totally.
Like you said in your talk, you're better at the nose than most people would in fact expect.
Yeah. And it's like I said, it's my yes that's hard to find. And I'm curious what that's like for you too. Like the older I get, the more I'm like, oh, like I said, even the informal, we'll call it informal, I'm not using casual encounters. I'm like, what is this meaning? What is this? Is this and you brought up like sexual conduit. And I love that because I recently wrote a piece on how I objectified women sexually. And when I was a sex worker, I had this like very charged experience with a woman that was like nothing like me in every way, shape, and form. Like, blonde hair, big like tits, like curvy, like laughed at all my jokes. I was laughing at hers. We would never hang out. But there was this like, and I broke it down because I was like, why did I have the most insane like sexual experience with this woman?
Right.
And it was like a mix of the evolutionary psychology of like, that was a sexual strategy, not a mating strategy, where I could relinquish the control of the hypervigilance, and there was no calculus running in the background. But also, like, I was a fearful avoidant, so it was like I got to experience that just fully in the moment as well. And then it was this erotic transference because I was a nerd growing up in school, and she represented like the popular girl,
Okay.
So it was like me getting to take power of that situation. It was this transgressive healing. And I was
because
like,
transgression can be healing.
Yeah. And so I could never figure it out. And then writing through it, I was able to alchemize that and understand it. And I was like, instead of objectification, I'm actually going to call her a conduit. And I've had many experiences. And also I've been the conduit.
But everything you just itemized is exactly what I mean when I say we're very sex positive.
Yeah.
Meaning we're like, cool, do that. But we don't go deeper, and you just did.
Yeah.
And that was a beautiful analysis of how much meat there is to what someone might have seen on the outset as just a very simple experience between you and this woman.
Yeah.
And you just broke down both all of this insight and learning, but also how healing sex can be if you bring the awareness to that. Because we need that insight to really walk away with the benefits of it.
Totally.
So that was like beautifully said. Because to have done otherwise might have been to engaging in sexual bypassing and to miss out on having used sex as medicine and all the beneficial aspects. You started that off by saying I objectified her. Do you problematize objectification, or do you make room?
Now I've changed that terminology to like sexual conduit. Like it was because also let's talk about objectification, because there's certain settings where I really like to be objectified, right?
Of course.
And if we look at like Betty Martin's Wheel of Consent, right? Take and allow. Like I really love being taken or allowing sometimes, and just not having to think at all. And I haven't been the best at receiving, which is interesting, but being taken, where I'm like, it's not my decision to make with consent, it's a consensual conversation. Yeah. And it's like, can that have a positive connotation? Do you use it with one, or what?
It's one of the, every year or two, I have like 15 concepts on like work in progress.
Yeah.
And I'm just constantly bumping into it throughout the course of the year. And objectification is one of them, because I think you just explained a really beautiful understanding, as does the concept of conduit. And I just would always pan out and notice how objectification is how we spend most of our life relating to people. When you go to the restaurant, you don't say to the server, what is your name? Like, what is your experience of engaging with us? And I want you to weigh in on how we're making you feel. We objectify people all day long, right? So there's like a normality to it, but then we problematize it in sexuality. And as you just pointed out, there can be something really beautiful, healing, and arousing in it if it's coming from our own internal sense of essentially subjectifying ourselves in that objectification, because we have control and power within that.
Yeah.
Right? And you're great to speak on it. Yeah. You also said something that I bounced off you quickly that I really loved in your talk, was this idea of primary knowledge and gatekeeping around knowledge making. And you had said in your talk that lived experience, I love this because I agree with this, lived experience is primary knowledge, right?
Yeah.
Say more to that, because I love
it. I mean, it was because I was in sex work for quite a few years before I ever got into sexology. I didn't even know what that word meant, right? But I was like, why do I find this so fascinating? And why, even though I don't have to do this, I keep coming back to it. It was just that innate curiosity that I was drawn to about, in relational dynamics, specifically with men and just what they would share with me. And then so when I decided to go into the field of sexology, I was like, I started at one organization, not Shaw, because I love Shaw, clearly, but another one where it was somatics based, and it really fucking pissed me off because they were trying to bypass things that were like innate to me as a sex worker. And I was like, you can't manufacture empathy. You can't manufacture attunement. And they're teaching you how to manufacture these things. And this is where it kind of gets like confusing to me because I'm like, sex workers innately embody this knowledge, both through going into it, because it takes a certain type of person by choice, again, the by choice sex worker, to enter that line of work. And then, and then you develop the skills and refine them as you like stay in it longer. But yeah, I found it really frustrating. And especially like if we look at like asex stance on sex work, because I'm like, oh my God, I was miles ahead of so many people. And I still, you and I know as much as anyone, we look at certain podcasters, certain influencers. I'm like, how much more are we going to talk about like 8 different anal lubes and responsive versus, spontaneous desire without getting into the deeper felt stuff.
Yep.
And it infuriates me still because I'm like, people are just looking at the surface. They're looking at the Taylor Swift.
And we're going that way fast and furious.
Yeah.
Fast and furious.
Yeah.
So back to your quote. So I loved you just holding space and reminding everyone that like you bring much in. And that's what I love about Shaw, not to plug Shaw, but let's plug
Shaw. That's why we're here.
There's not a lot of organizations that really do kind of take the hierarchy and balance it out and make it more horizontal power.
Yeah.
That's what I see. Because at least when I put the conference together, I actively look for people like you and even Norma, who's working with a law firm and is also a creator, and just bringing in all of these amazing angles and lenses. And so even though your presentation, for instance, might have for some felt very sex work specific and such a powerful call to action, but I was able to take so many things applicable outside of that to my own clinical work. And in fact, that statement about my lived experience is primary knowledge is a battle I often have as well, because as a clinician, I believe my 25 years of clinical experience is as valid as someone who's doing a double-blind, peer-reviewed piece of research.
Yeah.
I've been doing something for 25 years.
Yeah.
The amount of hours I've sat doing sexual histories with people has meaning and value, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
You're like, I have spent time sitting with people with the most intimate, shamed part of them.
Yeah.
And I have a lot to bring to the world in the field.
Yeah, especially when it comes to men's sexuality.
Yes.
Because again, with self-reporting, we can't get that. No one's going to get what I got behind closed doors.
Self-reporting is horrible.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, how much kind of like misinformation and false data are we getting around that? You know, what's really irking me these days is like the dating data, right? Because it's like for, I don't know, the 80% of women want 20% of men or whatever. We're hearing a man has to swipe like 300 times to get, 2 matches or whatever it is. And I'm like, but also a man is swiping because, he would have sex with pretty much anyone. A woman is rooted in hypervigilance if we're looking from an Evo psych lens again. Yep. So like the incentive, the intent is different. Yep. So I don't like that comparison because we're neglecting nuance within it.
Well, I see where you're going. Beautifully said. You can't compare the two as though they're right.
Yeah.
Right. They're coming from different stances, perspectives, and also levels of safety.
Yeah.
100%. And that's why, again, like you being present in a conference like this is so powerful. And again, thank you, because I walked away feeling empowered, and I'm not a sex worker, but you gave me something that I was putting into my own pocket because I feel beat up by the way I approach research because of my own clinical experience.
Yeah. Well,
so that was powerful.
Well, and I love that we can just have these conversations. And I'm curious, like, also, what is your experience with, because I have a very unique lens on this, on erotic transference with your clients. Like, obviously, you're a good-looking guy, and like you're pretty open about your experiences as well. I feel like I have the same, and I actually quite like, workshopping that. People are like, oh, Like, isn't that a conflict of interest? And I'm like, that's
Powerful
that would be a conflict of interest for me to deny that part of things.
Yes. I mean, covertly or overtly shaming.
Yeah.
I think, as you're pointing out, it's a powerful tool. It's a powerful tool of everything. It's an entry point for me. Number one, I know I'm doing good work with a client in terms of creating secure attachment and safety when they'll share with me that there's some kind of erotic transference, because it's coming either at me or from me. Right? It can come from me because I'm a human. It can come from them towards me.
Yeah.
And it's led to some of the deepest work, looking at it, them towards me, them sharing that. Again, I feel like we're doing some really deep work. And number two, we can look at the fantasy they're projecting onto me. What might I symbolize, and what might it communicate in terms of what they want and what they're looking for in the world? I've had sessions with sex workers that it was really healing when they said, can we barter sexuality for these psychological services? I remember the first time that came up into my office, and I said, thank you for being honest, but what a powerful moment where I can represent a man not wanting that part of you, and that we can have a safe, intimate space, and it's rooted in something else.
Yeah.
Right? And the work just drops and deepens. And my response, being so supportive, also just further reinforces safety and healing.
Yeah, that is so cool, because it reminds me of what my coach brought to me when I first started working with her. She is very expensive. And so I had a lot of holdups around that, but I also knew people that had worked with her, and I knew I had a lot of limiting beliefs. And so she's like, well, I'm like, I can't afford you, frankly.
Right.
And she's like, well, if you had to, like, what would you do? I'm like, sex work, duh, And she's like, no, but like, we want to work on you receiving. The whole thing is I'm a shit receiver. So she's like, what if you just tried, this is really funny. She's like, what if you just tried asking men? Like, telling them like what you are doing, and say, I would really love some help with this. Not bartering with them.
Yes.
But just seeing, and she's like, you're going to get a lot of no's, but like, we're exercising that muscle for you to practice receiving. And like, maybe I can receive without having to give. Because I think the big dilemma or paradox with a sex worker is like, you yearn for someone that accepts you so greatly, right? And if then you come out and your partner is okay with it, you're like, you must not really love me if you're not trying to rescue me from this at the same time. And it's like, that can be true, by the way. There's certain relationships where the partner's strictly indifferent, or he's leveraging off of that, right? Or, it's like, no, I trust you with your freedom and autonomy. And also know that sex work is not the same as sex, by the way. I equate it to like giving a massage or giving like Reiki, or, it's like, it's something completely different. Have I had great sexual experiences with clients? Sometimes, but like maybe like 2 to 5% of the time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean it's not a great experience, because I like, it means something, right? But how it feels to me is extremely different.
That was an interesting moment. So when I dated a sex worker, a lot of my friends, upon finding out that I was monogamous, right? But that they were a performer, and that wasn't fair. And I was evolved enough to say to them, it isn't about fairness. It's about equity, not equality. Equity in that way, meaning, what do we each need?
Yeah.
I am more monogamously centered because of all of my stuff, but also because at that time I was very busy professionally. I didn't have the time and energy.
Yeah.
And this funny term emerged called pornogamous.
What?
When perhaps one partner is monogamous, but the other is a sex worker of some kind. And so pornogamous is this honoring of like that distinguishment, right?
Wow.
But back to your example with your coach, I also loved hearing what you said, because it was about how the process, the whole, everything's the therapy, right?
Yeah.
And I loved how your coach was looking at how, even though it might sound like we're not talking about anything coachy or therapeutic, because we're just talking about the finances, it's like, no, that gets to be a part of the healing too.
Yeah.
Everything can be.
Totally. Like, I have a client right now who's, she has a tough time receiving as well. And it's a reflection on, how you do one thing is how you do everything, I could believe. It's this lack of abundance, the scarcity mindset. And I'm like, she has some blocks. Actually, that's what she came to me for. But I'm like, she's also needing to she wants to ask for a raise. And it's like, she over justifies things. And I'm like, you don't need to do that. So we have practices around embodying that without having to over explain. And it's like, and she's understanding it. She's like moving mountains through that, because it's like, yeah, if we're comfortable asking for what we want in the bedroom, we're comfortable asking for a raise.
100%. That's why I love like a sexological model, is because if you can really go into the most vulnerable parts of yourself, sexuality, it has a ubiquitous effect, such as that.
Yeah.
Right. And that's why I love that in couples work. I know if a couple can really bear that part of themselves to each other, they can handle discussing, are we having another kid?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So I so love that.
Yeah. What do you think the most common issues that you're seeing now for men in sexuality?
This is so frustrating and disappointing, because it hasn't changed. And every year I bring a part of this in and I say to them, how is it now 10 years later and I could have the same slide presentation? It's one of the main ones is this concept of erectile dysfunction.
Okay.
I don't support the idea of there being such a thing. Are there small, rare cases where it's an issue that is heart health driven and all that, and it might be a canary in a coal mine? Yes. But generally, it is a misunderstanding. Again, standing back for a second, why I do think a huge part of therapy and coaching is information providing, but I use the word erectile disappointment. It is not dysfunctional that your penis is not operating like a dildo. It is not supposed to. It is not going to get hard and stay hard when you want, how you want, with everyone you want. That is not a dysfunction. We do not need a pill. A pill is to do sexual bypassing. Let's stay in eroticism. You have fingers, you have tongue, you have toys, stay in the game. Taking the pressure off your penis actually allows you to relax. Erections are our parasympathetic nervous system. That means we have to feel safe. We have to feel safe in our body with the other person and what we're doing. And you won't if there's an expectation that you're supposed to perform, which is why performers use pills, because they're embodied and they're aware of some of that. So I tell the men it's sexual, it's an erotic disappointment, not a dysfunction. We don't need the pills. We don't need the label. Let's learn how to move away from it. And that is never ending. I can't believe we're still talking.
What do you do with women that take that personally? I've been one of them, so I'm still like, how do I manage that?
It is so hard, understandably, for a partner to be on the receiving end of that and to not think that that is driven by your lack of desire or care for me. So it's psychoeducational. It's explaining to them how the nervous system works. That first and foremost, before it's even about you, the person before them, it's about their relationship to their body, to others, and to that moment. And if they don't feel safe and relaxed, and they can't, if they think, and the partner might have reinforced that there's a right way to do it, that we have a goal, and it's very performance focused, we'll never get there. It's also explaining to women the difference in the arousal systems, and that men's sexual functioning is very fragile. And that a lot of women aren't so aware of that in themselves because they don't have external genitalia that is so overt. So they're not aware of the nuance.
And the vulnerability of it.
And the vulnerability of it. Being in that top giving position, there's a lot of stress.
How much of a man's arousal is emotionally rooted?
It's kind of like what you're saying over and over, how you do something's how you do everything. Everything has an emotional component. When we are touched, all of that goes up and through the brain before it comes back to give a response. And so your brain, the meaning you're making out of things, about all of it, about what it means for me, for you, about my body, my gender, like all of that is impacting the response that's going to come after having been touched. It is not as simple as if you were turned on by me, you would be demonstrating that physically. The psychological arousal is also separate from physical arousal. I can be so turned on by you psychologically, but my body does not necessarily respond in kind. And we have to get familiar with that incongruence.
Right. And you talk a lot about the arousal template.
Yes.
So is that clearly that's something that you believe can be built out and carved out? And how do you go about doing that? Because back to what we were talking about earlier, most people learn to have sex in one way. And it's like they think that's it. And then once the honeymoon stage is over, that's all they know. And it's over. Okay.
Well, let's add a couple more layers. The minute I hear a guy say, I know what every girl wants, I know I know you're horrible, because everyone's body's different and it changes within context. Number two, everyone tends to have sex up to their level of development or anxiety. And so it's the same way. Number three, men tend to masturbate in habited, rigid ways that often aren't even transferable to a partner. Okay, so what does that mean? Rough example, the way most men masturbate is They hold their pelvis still and they move their hand. Okay, well, when you have sex with people, you don't sit your pelvis still and fuck yourself with something. You actually, it's quite the opposite. You have to learn how to be fluid in your hips. A lot of men are uncomfortable with hip fluidity, which is what they need to work on.
Yeah.
So I also talk to them about masturbating in ways that mimic penetrative sex, if that's what you're looking to have, really pushing on the boundaries of the positions they masturbate in and have sex in with their partners, and just backing out of this idea that it should always look the same way. Our sexuality should be like our diet.
Yeah.
I don't know what I want today. I have to check in with my body and see if I want something hot, cold, spicy, more neutral, or whatever it is. It should be an ever-evolving system that's based on how I feel in my body, about my body, with my partner, and it changes.
And that's what porn actually can be used as a tool for. And I know you prescribe porn, and I believe the same thing, in diversifying our sexual landscape in every way possible. It's like, it's so not fixed, it's fluid. And, we hear all this about porn addiction, and I'm like, and then what happens is like the men go this abstinence model, and then, then they watch porn again once, they throw the baby out with the bathwater because they can't discern fantasy between desire, and they think they're bad because they watched porn one time, and it's like, it's just a disaster. So how do you use porn in a positive context?
I love this question. Thank you for asking. So first off, I love what you just said. The sex addiction model and this pathology model moves you away from and shames. And what the work needs to be is how to integrate it in and find a healthy relationship with it. But to your question, healthy porn use. Number one, the most important part is no media is neutral. Just like no relational or sexual situation is neutral. It's impacting you and updating how you feel about self and other. What does that mean for porn? Don't watch porn that doesn't look like your body. I start there. So if you're a man with a smaller penis, stop watching large penis porn. That is inherently, you're internalizing that I am not that and I need to be that, and you are shaming yourself.
What about like a size kink thing or cuckold? Like, does that factor
Different.
in? Okay.
If it is truly driven by that, which isn't always the case, we go so broad, right? So I said to some people that were porn producers and creators, we talked about diversification, and they said, awesome, but we're also trying to sell a product. And so we're meeting the market demand, and the market demand is for certain body shapes and sizes.
Yeah.
So as culture changes, we're happy to change. We're happy to be a part of that change, but we're still in industry trying to make money.
Yeah.
Right? So you have to hold both, and I understand and appreciate both. But outside of maybe it being a kink, we do want to take into account that if you were repeatedly watching masturbation, you want to make sure it's having a healing impact on your sense of body, your body shape and size, and also the shape and size of the partners having sex.
Yeah.
So if you're watching porn that doesn't look like your wife or your partner's or your own body, you are really disconnecting your arousal and pleasure from the reality you live in.
And I think that's why most women, that's women's number one issue with porn, is like, I can't put myself in the body of this, this creator, which I never felt like, which is, like, assuming so, like, because I'm like I kind of have a anatomically makeup of like what I saw, like I didn't know the difference. I was like, oh, that looks the same as me.
Sure.
But obviously now I'm like, oh, all women not the same. So I understand why they would take this personally.
Yes. I
didn't have that, so I teach myself the empathy there, which is like reverse engineer it, which is interesting. Whereas, isn't it different for men where they can like they're looking at the woman and less at the male, although that's still a component. But whereas women are like can't get into it if they're looking at the female body.
But even in that case, the presence of that male and his body shape and size and all that is still not neutral.
Ooh.
That is still, even if you're focused on the woman, it's still about the man who's pleasing and pleasuring that woman, and that's being taken in. Yeah. Because that's still, you have to remember, most people only see sex and porn. Mm-hmm. And so they don't have any competing reality-driven challenges to that isn't what you're supposed to look like or how everyone actually operates or functions. Mm-hmm. We don't have anything to compare that to.
Yeah.
And so that still becomes our core perspective, goal, and understanding. Yeah. So work on that. I would also say watch porn. There's some really amazing, and not to categorize in these ways, but there's some feminist specific porn that seeks to prioritize aftercare, foreplay, sensuality. And I have a lot of men watch that to see what it could look like.
Or the audible porn too. 100%. That's a big one. Yeah. I have a guy friend that I had dinner with the other week, and he told me, he was like, it was getting a little out of control, not to the point where I was like, I'm never gonna watch porn. but just like, he's like, I just wasn't getting as aroused in the real. And I was like, okay, what am I going to do? He got really into like audio porn, and he's like a very like traditional masculine, super like hetero, like and he loves it.
You know what
he
the
loves
beauty
it.
of that though is? It removes this obsession with like the concrete and the literal.
Yeah.
And he has to then create his own fantasy.
Yes.
And I think that's a really important tool, because I also tell clients, look at diverse porn, don't masturbate in the same position, because you're reinforcing the need to be in those positions and that level of tension and the way you're sitting in order to function or orgasm. So stand up, sit down, change the porn. Don't always use your hand. Have some things that are still that you are penetrating.
Yeah.
Different sensory components to really challenge yourself and to not be so dependent on the visual. Because as a couples therapist, I'm also thinking about how longer term relationships, our partners' bodies shift and change, and we can't always be dependent on aesthetic for arousal. Arousal sometimes has to come from a different source.
Yeah.
And that helps us going into audio and closing our eyes and not being so aesthetically driven. So I think all of that's
why my favorite is consensual mind fucking.
It's awesome.
Absolute favorite.
Yeah.
But yeah, to bring it back to sex education and tying that in with sex work, I'm curious what your thoughts are here. Like, this is my dream, to shift the paradigm of sex education. And like in my presentation the other day, I brought up bringing sex workers in the conversation. Like, how cool would it be to have like a Candace Horvath, who's a dear friend of mine, also leans more right and I lean more left.
She does.
Yeah.
She does.
But she's one of the most compassionate, like brilliant. Yeah, brilliant. Like, her mind is
brilliant.
insane.
I got to do her podcast last year.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah. And then like an NHL player I'm talking to shortly, who was the victim of abuse within within that community, and like bringing that to the sex education paradigm of like how that shaped his beliefs around sexuality.
Well, what's interesting is to support what you're saying about bringing sex workers in and other voices. Candace said something really powerful, where I was on her podcast and I said, I traditionally won't say anything negative about porn because that's all that's out there. And I wanted to, for the longest time, I wanted to make sure I was using my platform to at least talk about the benefit. And she said, please don't do that. Please talk comprehensively about it. Yeah. We do need to still be talking about the negatives. And I was like, I needed that permission.
Yeah. And that's the thing. What I love about her is like, we're big on the both and.
Yes.
This can be true. This can also be true.
And you might not assume that to be
No.
And
it's really funny because in this, in this industry that we're in, it's like she'll get a lot of backlash. Like, we were supposed to be on a panel together at a certain membership club, and they wouldn't let her. And behind closed doors, they're like, we love you, but politically, like, we can't. And I'm like, we're not talking about politics here. We're actually talking about the sex worker experience. And it's like, we have way more in common than we have apart, than we don't have in common. And I find that to be such an interesting part, is like, that we need to learn from that. Right. Especially, we're talking about wholeness, but how can we talk about wholeness without bringing that reality into the conversation?
That's right.
Right? We can't as like sexual educators, counselors, therapists, talk about wholeness without being like, different people have different political beliefs too. And like, again, we don't have to agree with that, but how is that symbolizing what we do or don't side with our sexual projections as well? So yeah, I find it really fascinating.
Beautifully said.
Yeah. Well, what are you working on now? What's exciting you these days?
So I am focusing a lot on education. So I'm working with the Sexual Health Alliance. We put together a doctoral program. We did it because, so historically I did a lot of media, had a couple TV shows, had a popular podcast, and got really disenfranchised with media. And I didn't like what was being pitched to me. And influencers were getting as much attention, but had no training, experience, credentialing. And I was kind of like, I'm bowing out of that. I can't battle that right now. And so we were talking about how there's just not enough good clinical sexology education at higher levels. And the universities that are offering it are very basic and they're not clinically focused enough. Yeah. So we put together a clinically focused doctoral program. So putting my heart and soul into that, I helped create and co-organize the Shaw conference every year. So this is year 3. So I'm putting my stuff into that. And honestly, just like focusing on joy, rest, and pleasure. I think I was working too hard. I drank in that American Kool-Aid of hustle culture. I was seeing patients all week, doing a live radio show at nighttime, and then flying on the weekend lecturing. Wow. And I was like, and then writing a book. And I was like, I'm tired. I'm not in my life, and I'm preaching. So I'm doing some small media stuff, but generally just trying to be in my life. I'm trying to just be rest, joy, pleasure, and spend my weekend with my little family.
Because it's like I spoke about the other day, it's the embodiment piece. We can't
Yes,
forget the embodiment
and we
piece that we're
do.
practicing what we're
And we
preaching.
do. And
Yeah.
we do. So I'm hoping to have a third book at some point. It's kind of written. It's kind of around what we're talking about, it's using sex developmentally, sex as medicine. I just don't feel like the world is ready for it or wanting it or deserves it, if
Yeah.
I can even say it
Maybe
like
after
that.
this administration.
Yeah, for sure. So we'll see. But I'm doing clinical practice. I'm telehealth now, so I can work with people around the country and the world.
Awesome. And where
Yeah.
can we find you?
DrChrisDonaghue.com and on Instagram at Dr. Donaghue. And then I have two books, Sex Outside the Lines and Rebel Love.
Thanks so much, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening today. You can follow us on the Next Man Up _pod on Instagram or on YouTube at Next Man Up with Coral. Please feel free to slide into my DMs with any thoughts, feelings, or praise, and let me know who you think should be the next man up.